I was released from prison about 3 years ago after spending 42 years in prison. Oh, speaking to the mic, okay. Right, I've written my speech down, so I'll read it out. Mumia Abu Jamal is a symbol of courage and defiance to an institutionally racist prison and so-called criminal justice system in the US. His continued imprisonment proves that the US prison system remains a weapon of state repression against black people particularly. Here in Britain, we have an equally racist prison and criminal justice system exemplified by the treatment of prisoners like Kevin Frackner. Kevin is a mixed-race Muslim prisoner, was convicted and imprisoned under the Joint Enterprise Law, a law that specifically targets black and minority ethnic young people. Throughout his imprisonment, Kevin has suffered brutality at the hands of prison guards and the prison system, but as always, resiliently fought back and refuses to be broken. In 2010, Kevin defended himself from a racist attack by a gang of guards at Franklin Maximum Security Prison and was charged with seriously assaulting the guards. At his trial, the jury acquitted him and concluded he had acted in self-defense. But Kevin has since been buried in solitary confinement for more than 10 years. In 2021, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture complained that the treatment of Kevin amounted to torture. Yet still, Kevin remains buried in solitary confinement. Mumia and Kevin are experiencing the worst racist violence of the state and therefore deserve our absolute and total support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. It's fights like yours that give us strength outside. So thank you so much for coming. There's a movement of prisoners inside, and we need it outside, and we also need to support those inside. We can't forget our brothers and sisters inside.
I hope you can hear me. Sorry if I'm shouting. It sounds a bit loud to me. Firstly, I want to say solidarity to Mumia and happy birthday. The way in which the powers of the state are used to suppress black people is something we must stand together against if we care about justice in this world. And when we care about justice, when we care about equality, we also care about truth. And how do we know the truth? It's so hard nowadays, especially with the amount of misinformation, disinformation, manipulation out there. Well, Julian Assange came up with an answer, and with colleagues at WikiLeaks and with the help of whistleblowers, those who really know what's going on, people like Daniel Hale, Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, Assange and WikiLeaks revealed to us what was really going on in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in Guantanamo, where 780-odd Muslim men and boys as young as 14, were held without trial or charge. My friend Mohamedou Ould-Slahi was held for 14 years without trial or charge. My friend Mansour Adaifi went when he was a 17-and-a-half-year-old boy and came out when he was a 32-year-old man. The trauma that they suffered, including being told their family was being tortured in the room next door, they were sexually humiliated, beaten up, deprived of basic rights. They weren't even allowed to stand up or sit down in their cells without permission. And if we care about people like Mohamedou and Mansour, we must stand with the whistleblowers and those who reveal war crimes. And it is because he revealed the truth about Bush and Blair's illegal wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that Julian Assange now sits in a maximum security prison about 2 weeks ago, entering his 5th year in detention, on remand, without trial or charge.
Shame!
My name is Deepa Driver. I'm an academic, and I've been the legal observer in the Assange case for the last 4 odd years on behalf of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers, the European Lawyers for Democracy and World Human Rights, and the United European Left in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I've been horrified by the denial of basic rights in the Assange case. And why does Assange matter to the people who are fighting for justice, for climate justice today? Well, if you think about Assange, you think about the revelation of war crimes, but what you must also think about is when Trafigura, the big company, dumped toxic waste on the Ivory Coast. It was WikiLeaks that had the courage to reveal that. And it is because of WikiLeaks' courage that the destruction, the forced migration, the torture of people in Iraq and Afghanistan, black and brown people in the main, has been revealed. Julian has been denied basic rights like speaking to his lawyers in confidence. All his privileged legal conversations were systematically spied upon. The United States attempted to assassinate him while he was in refuge in asylum, and they are denying him basic protections under the Extradition Act, and accusing him of espionage for committing the crime of journalism. If we want to know the truth about the climate, if we want to know the truth about green disasters, if we want to know the truth about the treatment of people, we must stand with Assange. Free Julian Assange now!
Free Julian Assange!
Thank you, Deepa. Thanks for coming and for the work you do. We support Julian Assange and all those inside. We need to protect whistleblowers because we need them to tell us the truth. And Mumia is one of those whistleblowers who's in prison. Okay, our next speaker is No Births in Prison. No Births Behind Bars and Level Up. Our sister, Janie, welcome.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So I'm here to speak on behalf of a campaign called No Births Behind Bars. The campaign was set up 2 years ago because, as you may well know, in the last 3 years, 2 babies have died in prison when their mothers went into labor without medical assistance. This has happened twice in the last 2 years, and yet the Ministry of Justice and the courts are still sending pregnant women to prison. Prison will never, ever be a safe place to be pregnant. This is something that the government admits. The prison ombudsman, when investigating one of the baby deaths, said that every single pregnancy in prison is high risk by virtue of the fact that a woman is held behind locked doors for extended periods of time. So by the government's own admission, prison will never be a safe place to be pregnant. We know that pregnant women are 7 times more likely to have a stillbirth than women in the general population. We know that 1 in 10 pregnant women in prison will give birth outside of the hospital, in their cell or on the way to hospital. And we know that in the last year, 50 women have given birth inside prison. It's not okay, and the reason it's still happening is because it's the same reason that all violations against prisoners happen, because they are out of public sight and out of public mind. And the more that we can keep building public solidarity with mothers in prison, with everybody in prison, with pregnant women in prison, the louder our voices will become, and the less the government, the sentencing council, the courts, the judges will be able to justify the inhumane practice of imprisoning pregnant women, knowing the risks that they face. So No Births Behind Bars is a collective public solidarity movement of parents and children and babies, and we hold protests outside the Royal Courts of Justice, we hold protests outside the prisons where babies have died. So please join our movement, because ultimately we know it's working. The Sentencing Council have committed to review the practice of sending pregnant women to prison. We know that the Royal College of Midwives are now supporting our campaign, saying prison is no place for a pregnant woman. So public solidarity is building, and the more of us who get involved, the faster we can end this inhumane practice. So join me in calling for no births behind bars!
No births behind bars!
No births behind bars!
No births behind bars!
this practice. We're going to put it into history. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, our next speaker, we have our sister Grace is lining up a recording that I hope we can hear by Mumia Abu Jamal's grandson. He sent a message for the picket today, and so we hope we'll hear that shortly. In the meantime, I'm going to call on Lisa from Women Against Rape to say a few words about women in prison.
From Women Against Rape. I'm grateful to the previous speakers and endorse what they've said. Particularly, I've been working with Deepa in the Free Assange campaign, and I'm glad that she pointed out how he has freed information that we wouldn't have otherwise got about state crimes, not only about the invasion of Iraq and other countries, but also, crucially, about illegal murder by US troops in particular, and about rape of women and children in these countries which have been invaded by the coalition of the US, UK and others. There are plenty, he should not be in jail, nor should Mumia and others. But there are plenty of people who I'm glad are in jail, and there are more who should be in jail. We're part of a worldwide protest movement, and we haven't been caught up in a witch hunt. We've fought against the witch hunt that's been led by the governments and by the media, the Swedish government in particular, who, when two women reported him, immediately seized on him to get him, is what they said. And they distorted and lied about the evidence, so that many women worldwide were put off supporting. But as you've seen, and as you will see, millions of women across the world do support his right to get out of jail. It's typical of how the state uses women's legitimate anger about the injustice that we suffer, having been raped or suffered domestic violence or abused as children. Another good example of it was just last week when Suella Braverman spoke about Pakistani men needing to be persecuted and arrested for child grooming. How dare they? How dare they use such racist bullshit when they perfectly well know that most groomers are adult men in their 30s who are white?
Yes.
We demand a change of priorities. They have to prosecute violence against us and not protesters. Protesters everywhere are trying to save the climate, trying to save Palestine, trying to save women from rape and domestic violence, trying to get the police who are actually doing widespread rape and domestic violence, as you will well know, get them put behind bars and protect us from their abuse of power, from their use of guns, from their use of their warrant cards to force themselves on women and children. We won't have that anymore. What we need is benefits and resources to give women and children the power and to protect themselves, including for women asylum seekers and immigrants, many of who have fled rape and domestic violence either in their home country or also here, and are facing no recourse to public funds rules, and the horrific Rwanda plan and the plan to make all people coming across the channel illegal. Most of these people have fled the environmental destruction and devastation of their countries by the countries of the West. And they have to stop prosecuting women for lying when they don't believe women about rape. There's a number of women we've worked with who've been jailed or arrested, and we know they were raped. We've worked with them closely. We've won £15,000 in compensation for one of the women just because the police didn't find the evidence she said should be there. And there was a reinvestigation, and they found the same evidence that she said was there. And then she won the compensation, and the man was jailed for rape. Now the police are under the spotlight for all the crimes, corruption and lying that they've been doing. All these cases have to be looked at again. We have to stand behind those women as well, and all the women in prison who shouldn't be there, a large majority of which are survivors of rape and domestic violence. And in New York, the women prisoners movement and the formerly incarcerated people's movement is massively strong, and they've won a new law which enables women who are abused by guards in prison to take them to court and sue them for sexual abuse. And that is the kind of new law that we need, not the laws that are being introduced by this government, which give more and more powers to the police to abuse us, to abuse protesters, and generally throw their weight around. We won't have it, and we have to stop them together.
Woo, thank you, Lisa. Okay, we have Cecil Gutsmore here somewhere, who's ready to speak, I think. And we have other members from the UK Mumia Campaign who are going to speak.
Comrades, better late than never, as they say. Good to be with you. We're here for Mumia Abu Jamal. And as we should all know, we're talking about one of the leading activist intellectuals of the 20th and early 21st century. This is a man who has been in prison for 40 years and who, whilst in prison, is crystal clear that the freedom of imperialism's millions of political prisoners is important, but that it is the prisoners of imperialism's worldwide oppressed. It is their freedom, their self-liberation that will liberate him and us. Mumia Abu Jamal, let us be clear, is not guilty of what he is charged with. There is no doubt about that. He could not have committed the crime for which he was sent to jail. So let us be clear with regard to Mumia. We are in the presence of an innocent prisoner of US imperialism. Let us be clear, my brothers and sisters, that we're talking about a victim who has been made a victim of all the levels of US imperialism. If you look back into Mumia's history, you will find that years before he was arrested and shot and convicted, they thought of charging him with a murder that took place in Bermuda. He was in California at the time. If you look at his record, you will see that in California, they thought, the US state and the states within the US thought about getting him. If you look at his record, you will see that the authorities in the state of Pennsylvania, where he was eventually framed, thought of getting him long before they did. Beat him up, criminalized him long before they actually put him in prison for this alleged murder. And so let us be clear also that at a higher level than that, the US Supreme Court and US President have been complicit in the imprisonment, deprivation of freedom of Mumia Abu Jamal. Let us be clear about that. Let us be clear that there was a US allegedly black president who all he had to do to get Mumia out was to authorize an investigation into the assault on the civil rights of African Americans and especially of Mumia Abu Jamal. That did not happen. Obama walked away from the White House and left Mumia in prison. This is the same Obama who was telling African Americans that America was built on freedom and justice. I don't know what kind of crazy this man was, but you don't have to look too carefully to see just how crazy he was. And now we have another allegedly black person, second in command, allegedly, of the United States of America. She also is not lifting a finger for Mumia and for the 2 million other African Americans currently imprisoned in the United States of America. And let us be clear what the prison industrial complex is. It is and represents the discovery by the United States capitalism that you don't have to have black labor power in factories to make money out of them, that you can incarcerate them and make money out of them same way, right? And if you look at the prison industrial complex, you will see that it's the same set of bogus capitalists. It's the same set of bogus capitalists that are selling arms, running prisons, etc., etc., etc. So, here in support of Mumia Abu Jamal, be in no doubt that this is perhaps the most principled cause you'd ever come out in support of. Free Mumia Abu Jamal.
Thank you, Cecil, a long-time supporter of Mumia. And I should just add that we support Mumia because he supports us. He's been on death row, he's been in prison for 42 years, but he's never stopped organizing from inside. He's written about 12 or 14 books about the movement. One of them is called Jailhouse Lawyers. Oh, yes, and we have a book stall just to my right. Please go and have a look at books and leaflets. Sisters, you're very welcome. We have a sign-up sheet. We have leaflets to keep in touch with the campaign. Mumia is a fighter inside, and we need him outside. He's been somebody also who has defended women and spoken up about women in the Black Panther Party and how they were crucial and the backbone of that organizing, and that had not been said. And he's a very important political person. And that is why he's internationally loved and has millions of supporters. But now we have to redouble our efforts to get him out of prison once and for all. And we say, free Mumia!
Free Mumia!
Free Mumia!
Free Mumia!
Free Mumia now!
Free Mumia now!
Okay, our next speaker is, I think we have a sister who's going to speak about the prisoners in Bristol.
Yes, she couldn't.
Okay. Sister Crystal is going to come and speak about what's happening, the prisoners in Bristol.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Great turnout here. Really good to see you all. Some of you may know that on the 21st of March in 2002, there was a protest outside the Bristol police station, the central police station, and the police aggravated it and launched an attack on the protesters. This was part of the Kill the Bill movement. And you will all know that Bristol was the city that pulled down the Colston statue. Yes, indeed. So, as a result, really, of this brutal crackdown by the police, the young people have been paying a very high price ever since. Many of them have been given really heavy prison sentences, way more than those who rape and murder us. We have one young woman, a woman of color, and in fact that's another thing that was striking about this protest, is that people of color were targeted. And she was sentenced to 5.5 years on completely spurious and rubbish evidence, which of course the police always cook up. And that is now pouring out in every avenue of the protests that we do, just how much the police are responsible for the violence themselves. And the mother of the young woman, Mariella, the mother, Heidi Gedge, spoke yesterday very eloquently and passionately about the impact on her daughter and herself of getting a sentence like that. She spoke at our Women Speak Out, and in fact you can watch what she said here. There's a QR card if you want to photograph that. You can see how well she spoke and how she connected it with other struggles that we're all making, and how our young people are being criminalized daily by the police. And we know that if you are a young black person, you're far more likely to be stopped and searched, including if you're a young girl, you will be stopped and searched. Or even searched secretly in a school allowed by teachers. This has to stop. These are the injustices that are being spoken about. But the Avon and Somerset police hit a lot of these young people, not only with batons, but with their riot shields. And at least one protester was knocked unconscious. And in the contrast to that, the police claimed that they had serious injuries, none of which they had any evidence for, of course. But over 40 people have now been charged with offences relating to that disturbance, with at least 30, having those charges escalated to riot, from sort of the disorderly or disobedience. They now brought in the Riot Act against people, and that has to be changed. And the Justice for Bristol protesters really need our support. We cannot forget them. We cannot forget those young people. And there's a lot on the website. I'm sorry I don't have their information, but follow them on Twitter and see what you can do to support these young people, to write to them, to tell them they're not alone and they're not forgotten. And the demands of the campaign are a public inquiry to uncover the full extent of the violent action against protesters by the Avon and Somerset police, and a judicial review into potential unlawful political interference in the judicial process, and of course the disproportionate use of the riot charge. So I do urge everybody to get the information. We have it as well, so come along, let's pull together and get these charges dropped against these young people, get them out of prison and get them as part of where they need to be, which is back in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Absolutely, we must support us. I think next we're ready to hear a recording by Mumia Abu Jamal's grandson. Susie, are you ready? Okay, we're just setting up. Mumia Abu Jamal's grandson runs an Instagram account called Love Not Fear, and please follow it on Instagram. It's packed with information, and he's been organizing flat out for his grandfather, and is really a great speaker. And really, I should have said today there are also events in Philadelphia for Mumia, in New York, in Mexico. Yes, and while I will have a quick announcement while we're waiting, I'll hand over to Nikki.
So on Sunday at 4:30, there's an action outside the Home Office called Climate Justice is Migrant Justice. Migrant Justice is Climate Justice. And these pink leaflets that are being given out are actually origami boats, if you follow the instruction on the front. And it's also a letter to your MP on the back. And we're asking people to make up the boats, bring them along to the Home Office on Sunday. And we're hoping for 10 or more thousand boats to be outside the Home Office and then to be sent to MPs, demanding that the illegal migration bill be dropped.
Thank you, Nikki. Please turn out for that important demonstration, because we defend not only prisoners, but also the people who are being put in detention centers. And we're hoping to have a speaker from the All Africa Women's Group who's going to talk about women in detention centers, which is another form of prison. I'm going to hand over to Susie from FRFI to play the recording of Jamal.
We say no to war. They say, spanning from the 16th century to present day, Great Britain is accredited for being the most successful imperialist country in the history of the world. And we say no to war. We say imperialism has been a plague, a scourge, a conquest of blood and earth. And even the un-United States of America picked up the baton to become an imperial world power. And they did not say no to war. From Japan to the African motherland, to the so-called New World and everywhere in between, we defy the war machine because we know the value of resistance. We know the value to dream of revolution with the intention of making our dream come true. We know the value of fighting for the people today and winning for those who inherit the earth after us. For our children should not inherit the struggle. We say no to war. We say no to racism. We say no to those that say no to revolution. And we say yes to love. We will win in love, not fear. The fear confines us. The love keeps us strong. Join the fight to free political prisoners and free my grandfather, Mumia Abu Jamal, a journalist that's powered by love, even in the inhumane confines of prison. Mumia needs your help today. Go to lovenotfear.com. That's LOVENOTPHEAR.com to join in our calls to action. Write letters to Judge Lucretia Clemons demanding Mumia's freedom. You can also record a 30 to 60 second video and tag at Love Not Fear on all social media to join in the video challenge. Let's all say no to death by incarceration and help me save my grandfather. We love you all. From across the Atlantic, we say no to war and we say no to racism. We say yes to revolution and we say yes to free Mumia Abu Jamal. And love, not fear, Jamal Jr.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we're going to hear from Nikki now from Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, who's going to talk more about the connections with imperialism in the UK and the prison system here.
Hi, as Grace said, I'm speaking on behalf of the organisation Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism, and we've campaigned for many years in solidarity with Mumia, with political prisoners around the world. Is that better? Yes. And indeed with so-called social prisoners, those people who went to jail for the crime of being black, of being Roma, of being foreign nationals, or primarily of being poor. The British prison system, like all capitalist prison systems in imperialist countries, is there as a tool of oppression to be used by the ruling class to keep the rich rich and the poor poor. In fact, the very function of the British criminal justice system is to keep the rich wealthy and the poor in their place. Historically, Britain has actually only had a prison system for the past 300 years. It's the Industrial Revolution, it's the rise of capitalism which gave us places of incarceration which are to discipline the working class and to keep them, to keep us in the place which we're allotted to. I'm standing here with all of you in solidarity with Mumia, who has raised his voice from within the bowels of a very similar prison system way across the ocean in the US. Equally bad, in fact worse in many ways. Draconian, punitive, deadly. And Mumia fights back every day. His tool of fight back is the pen and the voice. Other prisoners take a more direct route, and what they choose to do is to smash up the establishments in which they're held. And we have to be unrelenting in our solidarity and offer our solidarity to those who fight back with the pen, those who fight back with legal cases, and those who fight back by physically destroying the environment around them. Now, several speakers have mentioned Kevin Thakra, who is a prisoner of colour held in the British prison system. He is held within the segregation unit of HMP Belmarsh. Belmarsh is Britain's securest prison, and the seg unit is like the deepest bowels of the most secure prison. And next week, there's a court case outside in the High Court in the Strand, in which his legal representatives will challenge the continued use of his segregation to detain him. And a lot of us are going there to protest, and there are leaflets here you can take about this. And we want people to join us. We don't want this to be a fringe issue, which a few concerned individuals, those who actually know somebody kept in those conditions, we want this to be part of class struggle, part of the struggle against racism, part of the struggle against imperialism, and as we see increasing numbers of environmental protesters getting herded into prisons for contempt of court or for the actions they take, part of the struggle to save the environment and save the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's very important that we remember all those inside, including the climate justice protesters. Yes, Marilyn Reed is here. Would you like to say a few words? Marilyn's daughter tragically died in prison, and she's going to say a little about the struggle that the family has done to get justice.
Hi everyone. I don't know if some of you know about my daughter Sarah Reed, who died in Holloway in 2016. She was basically placed in Holloway. She was placed in Holloway from a mental institution to be psychologically assessed to see if she was fit to go to trial. She had been sexually assaulted by an elderly patient in the Maudsley in Camberwell. Cut a long story short, she was placed in Holloway in October, the end of October 2015, waiting week after week after week, allegedly, to have psychologists to come in to Holloway prison to assess her, to see if she was fit to go to trial for defending herself from being molested. She said the elderly patient wanted to rape her because she was under the influence of her medication. I went to every hearing at Borough Court, where she would go every week, sometimes twice a week, and waiting to be assessed. Eventually, about 2 weeks before her death, all contact was cut off. She was no longer going to the court for any hearings. They made claims that she said she didn't want to see family and she didn't want to bring family, which was a lie, because she has a daughter, and she used to ring every other day, and the calls and everything ceased round about January 2016. Eventually, they claim, when I went to see her on the 2nd of January, that she was being hostile. But what I had observed was she was not being medicated, because she had a long history of mental health after being given her deceased 6-month-old baby to carry from a hospice to the undertakers, from North London to Woolwich. So she struggled with that for about 11 years. And what I found in this country, because I'm experiencing it now, when you go through mistakes, instead of helping you, they start to victimize you, to cover up their mistakes. I call it their abuse. So Sarah went through 11 years of torment. She was even beaten by an officer in Oxford Street, accused of shoplifting. She was found not to be a shoplifter, but on file you will see it says she was caught shoplifting. But there is a video on YouTube where she is saying to the officer, "Search my bag, I haven't done anything." She was beaten and found not to be guilty. But let's come back to 2016, January. I received a phone call on the 11th of January from the governor of Holloway, telling me that unfortunately my daughter had hung herself in a non-self-harm cell. Now, these cells consist of non-rippable sheets, and you can't tie anything anywhere to the room. Then I got a phone call 20 minutes later telling me, oh, actually, she'd not hung herself, that she'd tied up some of the bed sheet, tied it round her neck, and committed suicide. Now, I received her body. Her body didn't comply with what I was told, and I stood up for years fighting for justice for Sarah, because Sarah suffered because someone made a mistake giving her a deceased baby, and to cover up their crimes they medicated her. They changed her whole history, her childhood. When you see the files on her childhood, it's got all kinds of wicked things that were written. They even wrote her down as a paedophile. Yeah, she's a mother. She has an older child. She has a disabled sister. She has got nephews and nieces and cousins that she helped raise. But Holloway, someone changed her file saying, oh, she was having paedophilia thoughts a couple months before her death. Basically, I want to say there's something wrong in England. There's something wrong with our justice system. There are people that have been given positions of trust. They abuse their posts. I currently am suffering because I stood up for my daughter and my dead granddaughter, the one that they gave to my daughter at 6 months old. I'm being pursued by, I don't even know who, they're like invisible hands. But they use my council, they touch my gas company, they touch my Department of Work and Pensions. Any area that I am connected to in the UK, they interfere with. I've got family members that have had things done to them. I've had families where brakes have been cut. I just want to say, as long as I've got breath, I will always speak up for my deceased, beautiful daughter, Sarah, who allegedly committed suicide in Holloway on a lay-in bed. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I'm sorry that we're running out of time, but thank you for your contribution and your work. You and your family have worked relentlessly to get justice for Sarah, and we are glad to be working with you to fight also for your benefit rights for your other daughter. So thank you again for coming. I think the march may be getting ready to set off, so I think we're going to have to wrap up. Oh, can we remind people that there's a demonstration for Kevin Thakrar?
Kevin Thakrar is going to be in court on the 25th and 26th. That's Tuesday and Wednesday. Please join us at 9 a.m. to fight against it at the High Court. Outside the High Court, Kevin Thakrar on Tuesday. Join us to stop this injustice of somebody being in solitary confinement for the past 13 years. Can you imagine? 13 years in British prisons.
Okay, before we go off, I thought we'd take a photo together that we could send to Mumia if everyone wants to come here, gather around the banners.